Excellencies, Reverend Fathers, holy religious, and ladies and gentlemen here or watching on Fatima TV in Rome or on the World Wide Web, welcome to the third question and answer panel discussion with speakers from the Fatima Your Last Chance Conference. My name is Kevin Dias. Today on the panel we have Father Karl Stellen, District Superior for Poland for the Society of St. Pius X, Father Nicholas Gruner, the head of the Fatima Center, and Father Gerard Mura, a priest of the Society of St. Pius X, currently residing in Switzerland, and an occasional teacher at the Society Seminary in Germany. Once again, thank you to our conference attendees who have submitted many of the questions that I will be putting to our panelists today. I should like to begin with you, Father Gruner. Several of the conference attendees would like you to elaborate on what might be preventing the Holy Father from releasing the third secret and consecrating Russia. One of those attendees does not believe that the fear of offending the Russian Orthodox Church is a sufficient explanation, and he asks rhetorically, have our popes become so feeble that they would allow diplomacy to triumph over their responsibility to proclaim the truth? Another notes that in Monday's Q&A session, you stated that the Holy Father finds himself in a, quote, prison, unquote. Father, in your judgment, what exactly is the Holy Father afraid of?
Obviously, I'm not a member of the Vatican apparatus, so I don't know what goes on there day by day. I made reference to a speaker who was here, I think it was 2 years ago, or last year. It was Catherine Pearson, who pointed out there's only 6 possible logical reasons for why the Pope doesn't do the consecration. I suppose these might extend in the same way to why he doesn't reveal the whole third secret. There are certainly people who tell me that he intended to release the full secret when he went to Fatima in the year 2010. And that even though, if you look at his homily on the 13th, you see he introduces this thought. It seems like his homily was rewritten, but this thought is left towards the very end, in which he says, he deceives himself who thinks that the prophetic mission of Fatima is over. Why did he say this? It's a completely new thought out of nowhere. I think it's because he had wanted to say a lot more about this. And there is Cardinal Ratzinger in 2001, shortly after our conference here in the same hotel, spoke about that there would be a disequilibrium or an unbalancing of the Roman Curia, or another way of saying the Vatican. With regard, at that time, there was stories in the press of the Pope's life being in danger, and that there was more to the secret. Of course, we all know there's more to the secret, but the fact that it was becoming mainstream news was unsettling to people in the Vatican. I have walked in the streets in St. Peter's Square more than once. I've had priests come up to me, or others who work in the Secretary of State of all places, and they congratulate me for the work I'm doing and telling me to keep it up. Obviously, it's obvious to most people who think about it that there is a cover-up. And how they handle this is, of course, everyone has their own way of doing it. What is it that prevents him, I believe, is a major threat. There can be nothing else. That really, the offending the Orthodox will not be offended. It is not an insult to the Russian people, it's a blessing for them. It is, whatever this threat is, it's a major threat. As I explained on Monday, it could be such as a threat to blow up 5 Chernobyls at the same time in Poland or some other part of the world where they have these nuclear reactors. That kind of thinking, first of all, it's hard for us to imagine diabolical thinking. And if you start reading what the opposition, what the enemies of God have planned for us, and you see how they think, you can understand, begin to understand the kind of threats that have been made against the Pope, not so much personally, although they could be personal as well, but above all, it's for the good of the Church as he sees it. Whatever that threat is, the important thing is for him to be reassured that those threats will not be carried out if he obeys Our Lady. I've told this story before of Padre Pio saving the town of San Giovanni Rotondo. I had this story from the lips of this pilot, the American pilot, who was under strict orders to get rid of all his bombs, because he did not want to land with a bomb on board, as it would could blow up the airfield and blow up the plane as well. So when this pilot was flying over San Giovanni Rotondo, and he had enough fuel to get to the last 25 miles back to the airport, he realized he had a bomb on board, and he wanted to drop it. He didn't know what was underneath. It didn't matter to him because orders were orders. He would be court-martialed if he didn't. And yet he saw a man come towards him in the clouds and speak to him and say, "Don't do it." Here, this is at several thousand feet. And this cloud comes towards him and speaks to him in his own language and says, "Don't drop that bomb." He was very impressed. But nevertheless, orders were orders, and he went to drop the bomb by pulling the lever. But the lever jammed and he couldn't do it. He had no choice but to land with the bomb on board. Now, when the pilot landed, the commandante of that base, the American base there at Foggia, was very happy because he thought his pilot had already been killed. He was too long away. But when he realized they landed with a bomb on board, he wanted to court-martial him. And in his own defense, he said, "I saw this man in the cloud telling me not to do it." So now the commander said, "He must be flying too many hours, he needs a rest." So he didn't court-martial him. But he was telling this story, this account, to his friend, the man whom I met, Mr. Ortega, Alfonso de Ortega, and he said to him, and as he was describing what took place in the plane up above, a few moments before, he was in the mess, and there was a little Italian boy there, about 10 years old, who had been helping them, and he understood English. And the boy said to them, "Oh, that sounds like Padre Pio." And they said, "Padre Pio, who's he?" And he said, "Oh, he lives up on the mountain in San Giovanni. He's about 25 miles from here. And he says Mass every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning." So Ortega, who worked on the base but didn't fly, he said to the pilot, "Would you like to come with me tomorrow? I can get a jeep to go up there." So they both went up the following morning. And the flyer was a Protestant. He had never been inside a Catholic church. And both of them were the last ones inside the door. As you know, the very small church that was there then is still there. They almost no room for all the people that were there at 5 o'clock. They got in and had their backs to the wall. And Ortega was looking around, and so was the pilot. And different people came out, set up the altar, lit the candles and so forth. Nothing happened. But then all of a sudden, as Ortega is distracted looking somewhere, he gets an elbow in his ribs from his pilot friend and says, "There he is." He recognized Padre Pio as the man in the clouds. The point of this story very simply is this. Padre Pio had promised San Giovanni that they would have no bombs drop on their town. And Padre Pio kept his promise. The Blessed Virgin is much more powerful than Padre Pio. She can stop whatever threat is hanging over the church or the person of the Pope or of all of us, whatever it might be. Our Lady will do that for him. But he must still not be afraid. But yes, there's some fear. That's the only reason why he's not doing it. I hope that answers, but maybe, I know Father Murrah knows a lot about these things too. He's the source, Father Murrah is the source of the information about from Cardinal Chappie. And so he's well informed on different things I don't know about this message.
Father, would you like to comment on that?
I have some difficulties with English, excuse me.
Father Gruner, a second question from an attendee at the conference. He asks, given the importance of the third secret, do you think that those who know its contents should break whatever vows of secrecy they may have made in order to reveal it?
That opinion I might be disagreed with by many priests and theologians here, but I would say yes. Because a vow of secrecy which impinges upon the common good should not be enough to not release the secret. However, those who do know the secret obviously feel differently up to now. I know that Father Malachi Martin on the radio felt very bound by this oath, but he did say that his obligation to the truth was higher, and that if someone had figured out what the secret was, he would acknowledge, yes, that is the secret. And so I listened to that radio program. I have a tape of it. I've listened to it many times. And he was trying very hard to tell us what the secret was. Father Kramer asked him, among other things, after this program, if it was about the coming of the Antichrist, if I recall correctly, and he said, if it were only that. The secret is very horrific. Pope John Paul spoke about it as entire nations, people dying from moment to moment, millions of people from one moment to the next. We certainly can tell what the secret is from various apparitions and messages. It's in sacred scripture as well, and it is horrific, there's no question about that. The problem is that if I was given the secret, I would publish it. I have no compunction about that, for the very simple reason that it's meant for the faithful, it's meant for everyone. And it is a guide to all of us to protect ourselves from the dangers to our life and to our faith. And so I would say, for the sake of the salvation of millions of souls, that the secret should be released, and that no vow, every vow that is given has to be given for the honor and glory of God. God cannot expect you to obey a vow that is contrary to the interests of God. And as such, in a simple answer, I would say yes, they should release it.
Father Gruner, in your speeches this morning, you went over the history of Fatima. The great miracle of the sun occurred on October the 13th, 1917, where 70,000 people in and near Fatima, Portugal, witnessed the sun dancing in the sky and plunging towards the earth. However, on that day, the rest of the world saw no such thing. How could the sun dance and plunge for some and appear as usual for others at the same time? Was the miracle on that day simply a vision that those 70,000 people saw, or must we believe that the sun actually physically left its position in space to do what was seen in the cova?
If we got a third alternative, was the eyes of everyone else held so they didn't see it, it didn't get registered anywhere else, and was only seen in Fatima? I don't pretend to know the explanation of that. But as St. Thomas tells us, against a fact, there is no argument. 70,000 people saw this. And of course, it was spectacular. It was beautiful at first and spectacular, but more important than the sun dancing were the other miracles that accompanied this. First of all, there's the physical drying of the land and the drying of the clothes, which is physical. They knew they were wet, they knew they were soaking, and they knew that they were full of mud when they're kneading in the mud. And yet, the clothes dry. The clothes don't only just dry, they are cleaned, all instantaneously. How did that happen? Again, it's an intervention of God. How did God do this? Why is it when Padre Pio cures a man with a broken nose that he can't, his nose is still broken? There's a girl, Gemma, whose eyes, she still has no retina in her eyes, but she can see. Her seeing, or this man being able to perceive smell, ongoing, is a continuous miracle because you need the retina or you need the nerve to be connected. God wants us to recognize his power and how God has this person see without a retina or the person smell without a nerve connection. God knows, but he does. I don't worry about it, but there are many explanations. I know Frère Francois has one in the back of his book. I know there's other ones being offered, but it doesn't matter ultimately. God is saying, I'm here, I'm certifying the truth of this message. That's really the important thing.
Father Stalin, in your speech on St. Maximilian Kolbe, you spoke movingly of how Our Lady has received all graces from God, and because she has the loving heart of a mother, she wishes us to have those graces. You noted that we must pray and offer sacrifices to obtain those graces, but that St. Kolbe recognized that because we are weak, we need structure in our lives to do this. Unfortunately, you ran out of time before you could elaborate on that structure, and I would like to give you the opportunity to do so. What practical changes can we make in our lives to become instruments of Our Lady?
Thank you. Saint Maximilian Kolbe was always, on the one hand, a deep contemplative and a man of action. And as a man of action, he immediately saw that in order to take man's heart, you must give him not only once just a beautiful, great vision. You must repeat that all the time. And then he understood that if we have to answer to human weakness, human being forgets very quickly. And we have all the problem that we are completely in fire and flame if we hear something great for the first time, and the second time, and the third time, we get asleep about it, and we lose strength, and if nothing happens, the thing which was flame ends as a disaster. And many, many such movements ended like this. Fatima is the work of Our Lady. She will never allow that the movement of herself will die out. But it is our, as Father says so many times, is our task to take this message of Our Lady and bring it to the people. And this is exactly what Saint Maximilian Kolbe wants to make known to his knights. And he wants to make them knights. The first idea he had was simply to distribute miracle medals. He had nothing else because he was a friar, not even ordained priest. That is what Our Lady asked herself in the Rue de Bac, and which brought so many graces. But then after having founded the Knights of the Immaculata, he established his diploma and his statues where he says very easily, of course, and here he takes the idea of Our Lady of Fatima and says, the structure must always begin and end and live in the supernatural way, in this atmosphere of prayer and sacrifice. This is exactly what Our Lady teaches us through the three children and what we have to realize. But then Maximilian Kolbe goes further. Human being is not only praying and doing sacrifices, but he's a man of action. Now I can tell you from my experience as a missionary, I see always, if I bring a good idea to somebody, for instance, I tell to the young people in Gabon, in Africa, I explain them the life of Saint Maximilian Kolbe. If you find it, by the way, Maria Winoske, the Fool of the Immaculata, it's an amazing book. Even the most lazy young people will wake up to see such an example. An example draws them to this. But then, this is the first, to bring them information. That's what Father does all the time, what we do all the time. And then, this is the reason why Maximilian Kolbe wanted that the Knights of the Immaculata would also join together in order to make a common apostolate. And now he says very, very simply, so now take all your means, legitimate means, what you are able to do. If you are zealous and you want to do something for her, then look all over the talents you have received by her, by the way, and through her by our Lord Jesus Christ, and use them for the noblest task to help her to save souls. And so what everybody did, what Maximilian Kolbe said, you are first a knight in the MI1. it is the Militia Immaculata on the first degree. The first degree, you are a pioneer. You're alone, and you go into the world as a pioneer. You must be full of the fervor of Our Lady. You must know, because if you don't know, qui non dat habet, non dat qui non habet. He who has not, he cannot give hand down. So you must be full of the knowledge of that. And that is a very important, in my eyes, message, because one of the important means of founding a structure must be to teach the people who are interested these truths. The priests and bishops who would continue the work of such Marian movements should always have in mind that these people must have this idea, I must be full of this truth, so I must have this knowledge, and then hand down this knowledge. The second thing is, and you have now your talents. And so Maximilian Kolbe says, if you are some, you feel free to gather in a group, and this is I2, and you work together, and you make a very small congregation, association, in order to answer to this weakness. Because if you are several people, one is getting weak, but the other will be strong. You will say, wake up, let's go together. One is discouraged, the other has hope, and vice versa. And so you see that this common work will help one another to keep the fight. But then, also you have to establish a common goal. And so Maximilian Kolbe said, for intellectuals, you have now, for instance, the MI2 study and apologetics. So these intellectuals come together, they study together very apologetical points, and work out together a tool of apostolate to go somewhere where these apologetics will be used. So they go to other intellectual groups and started to handle with them, to deal with them. I renewed this in Poland, and figure you out, this MI2, these are maybe 20 to 30 people working, coming together once a month, and then they have this idea to go to schools, universities, groups of people, knowledges, and what they know, and they speak about this and try to attract other people in this way. Other MI2 is a youth movement. In this youth movement, we have, for instance, young girls. We name them the Crusade of the Immaculata. The Crusade of the Immaculata, these young girls are now fed up with all what Our Lady did and say in Fatima. And thank Father Gruner, I get here many help to make up the mind of these girls, and to teach them what is a woman and what is the task of a woman as a future mother, as a spouse, and as in her great dignity. And it is incredible to see that these girls gather to, yes, we must do something for the others. And so we give them this knowledge, and we give them also ideas, concrete ideas, how to work amongst other girls. And so they bring other girls back through the Immaculata to her heart. And for instance, I had the opportunity to speak once in my life to Mr. Gibson. And through knowledges of Mr. Mel Gibson, I told to him, Mr. Gibson, in your house was the pilgrim statue of Our Lady of Fatima during 8 months. And Our Lady gave you the immense grace that you could make a movie, which moved, I would say, millions of people who would be able to be converted if there had been priests to continue this. Imagine, dear friends, priests, bishops, Ukraine, they show the movies. Outside the movies, priests come, sit down, and hundreds of people come out of the movies on the ground to confess their sins. This is what's happening in former Soviet countries. And these movements are what I wanted to say. That is what I would like to tell this man and say, you have so much talents from God, use them. And try to use this, what you have received, and to make for fruits for the salvation of souls. And that's what we also say to the young people. So just one interesting thing. We had this pilgrimage of Our Lady of Fatima, of the Padre Pio Institute, you know very well from Mrs. Silis, and they were also in Ukraine. It was the young people who organized, who were full of fervor to bring Our Lady from one place to the other. The priests said, these priests who are working along with us of the Byzantine Church, and the people, when they saw youngsters to have this Our Lady carried, sometimes miles and miles from one place to the other, there were processions put together. The people had a fervor to Our Lady of Fatima we cannot even imagine. Day and night this went on. They built for her altars, which were incredible. And at the end of this 2 weeks visit, there were not less than 20,000 people, Ukrainian Catholics, who signed a petition to the Holy Father for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. And this is, by the way, the work, concrete work of action of mostly young people who are interested in this. So all means, says Maximilian Kolbe, to use, and if you make a young man put into your action, and you feed this with a good spiritual, let me say, medicine, then the most important is that we will not become activists, which could be a danger. But then we allow her to work. If you give her the small finger, she takes your hand and your heart.
This next question is for you, Father Stalin, but I would also hope to get Father Gruner's views on this as well. Father, in your speech today, you noted that in 1917, Freemasons marched in Rome with signs boasting that Satan would reign in the Vatican. Cardinal Chiappi, a personal theologian to 4 popes, including Pope John Paul II, famously said that, quote, in the third secret it is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the church will begin at the top, unquote. Malachi Martin, both in his book Windswept House and on the Art Bell Show, wrote and spoke of a ceremony to enthrone Satan in the Vatican and of a pope under the influence of Lucifer. Is the presence of Freemasons and or Satanists in the Vatican a barrier to having the consecration of Russia done? And if it is, what can be done about it?
You want first? I think the first is to say that Maximilian Kolbe heard this from the mouth of these people. Of course, it is not a question, it is not a matter of a fiction. It's true that Freemasonry is everywhere and up to the tops. But I think that Freemasonry is always and will always be only a tool, the biggest one, the most horrible one of the devil, but the devil is limited. And God will not allow that the devil would destroy the church. So, and in these theological limits, in my eyes, you have to understand that to some extent, these enemies can, of course, enter the church and threaten the church within and destroy many things, but they cannot destroy the inner structure of the church, so that they would hinder the Pope or those who are responsible to act with their free will. And now, to what extent, humanly speaking, is this not possible anymore, or they are too strong, and so on, should not consider us finally, because all our arguments and all our hope is not natural. Because naturally spoken, everything is really lost. But supernaturally spoken, Our Lady just can make this, and the thing is finished. Saint Maximilian Kolbe has a beautiful thing, you know. For us, it's no problem. In any way, we are all zeros. The enemy is absolutely strong. He had all. He has money, he has all. And we are only zeros. 1 through 3, 5, 6 zeros. So 7 zeros together make a 0. So we are nothing. But put before these 7, 8 zeros a 1, you have a billion. The zeros, we are. The 1 is Our Lady. So if we go with her, she will certainly win over all Freemasons in the Vatican. But Father says certainly it's more detailed.
Well, I'd like to mention that this Pope Benedict XVI, has actually had a ceremony conducted to reconsecrate that chapel of St. Paul. That ceremony took place before the crowning of Paul VI. And it's interesting that Paul VI spoke about the smoke of Satan entering into the temple of God. Malachi describes this in great detail in his book, Windswept House, and he also talks about it in the Windswept House as a fiction, but the description is actual. In his other book, The Keys of This Blood, he reports it as a fact. But in the last year, I come to Rome about 3 or 4 times a year. When I was here, not this trip, but it might be a year ago, it might be less than that, it was carried in the newspapers, some of the newspapers, that chapel had just been reconsecrated, rededicated to God because of that. It doesn't say, but it's clearly, at least in my mind, because that ceremony took place there. So certainly the devil is limited and Our Lady is all more powerful. On the other hand, the devil's influence can make a difference in some people's minds and hearts, and therefore what we can do about it, of course, is pray more fervently for the destruction. What I've suggested, for example, is a rosary crusade, and I know that Bishop FYLC and the Society have a rosary crusade, as we also have, for the same purpose, for the Holy Father to do the consecration of Russia. Already more than 20 million, maybe more than 30 or 40 million rosaries have been said for this intention, but it's obviously not enough. But if there's enough rosaries said, then whatever power the devil has by these ceremonies, or lingering power that he wouldn't have otherwise, can be overcome by the crusade of the rosary.
My next question is for you, Father Mura, but again, I would like Father Gruner's input on this. Father, in your speech today, you described the miraculous results of various consecrations of other nations that have been done in the past. You suggested that even a greater miracle will happen in Russia after a consecration of that nation. What specific changes in Russia do you expect to occur when the consecration of Russia is properly performed?
It is not possible to see exactly what will be in the future, but we can imagine different possibilities. So it is possible to imagine this, that the conversion of Russia will be like an continuation of the graces the Virgin Mary, the Pilgrim Virgin, gave to peoples in the years of 1950. When the Pilgrim Virgin goes through countries from Europe, Africa, Asia, and perhaps a whole village or town come together to greet her, and many confessions were to hear from priests. There were graces absolutely exceptional, and it is possible to imagine that with analogous graces will be given to Russia. Russia will certainly be, in a certain manner, specially prepared for these graces, because we are the only non-Catholic, only non-Catholics who have a very veneration for Mary. Protestants do not have. But they have not the dogma of Immaculate Conception. And so we can imagine this truth, who is in the veneration of the Immaculate, who is included in the veneration of the Immaculate Heart, will have a great adherence for this people. And so a great movement can go out from population. I don't think the movement of conversion will go out from population, not from hierarchy, I imagine. But I can imagine that the consecration of Russia will be very late. So the Virgin Mary said themselves and to Sister Lucia, the consecration will be very late. Perhaps when Europe, Russia will be in great crisis, we can imagine that our nations will come with time in great crisis. And so the population search the help of God and will understand our unique help in this moment is the Immaculate Heart. And perhaps the Orthodox hierarchy will not be able, in the time of a great crisis, to give them a good orientation and the necessary orientation. And this act of consecration of the Pope will give them an orientation, the expected orientation. And so, through these instruments, perhaps God can begin a movement of grace in these people who have been prepared for in many years of sufferance under communism. Thank you.
Father Gunnar?
Of course, we don't know exactly the form this will take, but there's a book here called Russian Sunrise, which is a novel, or it's a fictionalized account of the future event of the consecration of Russia. And he envisions in his writing, I don't see anything contrary to the message at all in there, of a change in the government, a change in the society from day to day, and also a change in the financial, even their monetary system. All of these things he writes from the reflection of what Catholic social doctrine is, and which will be given to the whole country all at once. I find it interesting that Our Lady says, without that consecration, Russia cannot convert. I'm reminded of when I crossed the border from Austria into Hungary in 1971, that the change of the guard was not 2 soldiers with armed semi-automatics, but 3. And obviously, it's the same thing. It's symbolic to me of also why in making decisions that the GRU, or the military, has to agree with the Communist Party, has to agree with the actual person doing things, so that they're all 3 of them watch each other so that no one can go in reverse. And if one of them betrays, as they see the betrayal of this cause, the other 2, of course, can shoot the one that runs. And it makes it much harder for a collaboration. As accountants know, you need to make a thing requiring many persons to have collusion. Our Lady says that Russia cannot convert, that is, as a people, not to say Russians cannot, but the Russian people cannot convert because the devil has so entwined their society with these checks and balances against any conversion. The conversion has to take place at the same time, so that everyone agrees, so that no one is going to turn their guns on their fellow soldiers or whatever. How this will happen, of course, is by the power of Our Lady. We see that, for example, that the country of Mexico, when the Spanish missionaries arrived there in 1521, they tried very hard. I'm sure they must have been very holy priests, and yet they had very little success for 10 years. But in 1531, 10 years later, Our Lady appears to Juan Diego, and in the next 10 years, the whole country is converted. In this case, it is because Our Lady drew people to her sanctuary there. They looked at her picture and immediately wanted baptism. She could have done it faster, but the missionaries were so few that it took them all day long to baptize the 9 million people over the next 9 years. Our Lady went as fast as the missionaries could take care of it. Our Lady's arm is not shortened. She could do it certainly faster in Russia for the simple reason that, of course, we're not so far away and we have the means of getting there, and a lot more missionaries can be there in a very short time. And so how it is actually going to happen in the case of Mexico, it was looking at this miraculous picture, her self-portrait of Guadalupe. I expect there will be maybe things like that people will go and pray before their favorite statue of Our Lady or icon, and that she will enlighten them all at the same time. I'm not sure how she will do this, but we do have the promise it will be done. And we do have the promise that it will be evident. It will be evident to the whole world that it is through the act of consecration that Russia is converted. Because God wants to establish in the world devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and his way of doing this is having this public event which refers back to the Immaculate Heart, bringing about this miraculous change in Russia. And no doubt this change will be very profound. I also note that when St. Paul, who was the greatest persecutor of the church, was converted, he became the greatest apostle. And the great sign given by Our Lady of the punishment to come took place on the feast of St. Paul's conversion. Russia will become a powerhouse not only of conversion for themselves, but of missionary activity throughout the world, promoting devotion to Our Lady and, of course, devotion to her Son and the Catholic faith. It will be a marvelous time to be in, so much so that the whole world will be converted. We cannot have peace unless we're living the gospel. We can't live the gospel unless we're converted to the gospel. And so it's the whole world that is converted. It's the whole world, and this is foretold in sacred scripture in the second chapter of Isaiah. The nations of the world will say, "Come, let us climb the Lord's mountain. Come, let us see the Lord's ways. Come, let us enter into the house of God." That is the Catholic Church. That is all foretold, and this prophecy of Fatima is the fulfillment, will be the fulfillment when the Pope and the bishops finally do this consecration. It will indeed be marvelous, and it'll be almost unbelievable, those who are graced to be able to see this happen in their lifetimes.
Excuse me, I just wanted to add one small thing. I fully agree with Father Gruno that it must be an absolutely supernatural intervention. Maybe, you know, we have, our priests are regularly going to Moscow, St. Petersburg. We have a chapel in Minsk, Belarus, and we have this movement within the Ukrainian church. And all that shows us that, humanly spoken, the people now are even far away from a possible conversion from their heart at the moment, due to this horrible materialism they get from the West. These people are really morally completely destroyed from two sides, from the former communist system and now from the liberal Masonic system, so it's just a completely crashed down. The more Our Lady loved them, and we see that wherever, even the smallest site, we put Our Lady somewhere, we bring somebody to her, immediately from a man who was atheist, who didn't believe, who was completely in a deep immorality, he get the grace to convert. And in this way, we have, however, as Father does, but also everybody has, to prepare the ways of Our Lady. She will make the miracle, but then we have to have some missionaries. And I would like to point out that the Society of St. Josaphat in Ukraine, this group of priests who want to devote herself to the realization of this message of Our Lady, especially in what conversion of the schismatic Orthodox to the Catholic Church is concerned, the conversion of Russia. I think due to the increase of this movement, we can say that this idea, and seeing already if Our Lady through these people can a little bit work, even if there are thousands are coming and thousands are converting already now, what will happen if Our Lady will make that sign? So what Father Gruno says seems, humanly spoken, again, absolutely utopic, but really spoken, if I see this realized in the different concrete souls as we see it, we priests preaching the retreats, preaching them Our Lady of Fatima, the miracle happens already now.
This next question is for Father Gruner, but I'd be curious if the other two fathers would like to weigh in. Islam is on the march today. While the number of Catholics, and especially practicing Catholics, is dwindling, the number of Muslims is growing. In formerly strong Catholic countries like Spain and France, Catholics are even converting to Islam. Is it significant that the word Fatima is an Islamic name? And does the third secret of Fatima have anything to do with the growth of Islam? And will the consecration of Russia impact on that growth?
Well, certainly I said just before that the conversion of Russia will be followed by the conversion of the world, including the conversion of the Islamics. This conversion, there are Islamics, I'm told, by friends or people I know in Russia who are expecting the Pope to do something. They don't know exactly what it is, but they're waiting. There is a sense, there's a great expectation in the populations of the world. And although people get formed into this group or that group, those who are of goodwill and more reflective recognize that something more needs to take place. Islam itself will convert to the Catholic faith as a result of the consecration of Russia. And this, and in fact all the religions of the world, will convert to the Catholic faith. Our Lady chose the village of Fatima. There are many villages in Portugal, and no doubt she could have arranged, if she wanted to have Lucy, have her born in another city or another town somewhere else. But obviously she was born in Aljustrel, the hamlet attached to Fatima, and of course she came and is known worldwide as Our Lady of Fatima. I'm sure there's some significance of this, that even the Islamics, for example, there's a branch of them which are very devoted to Mary, the mother of Jesus. And so she recognizes nothing that you do for Our Lady, it goes unrewarded by herself. And no doubt she has these people at heart and looking towards their conversion, which she will achieve after the consecration of Russia.
Go ahead, Father.
I can perhaps add in some few words, but the name of Lourdes is too an Islamic name. Lourdes is an Islamic chief who converted to Catholic faith. He was the chief of an Islamic center on the time of 800 and converted to Catholic faith. He go to the center of to the Church of Le Puy and give all he had to Mother of God. Yeah.
I think considering Islam, it's a very complicated thing because there are many differences of Islam in itself. And the fact that Islamic, let me say, ideology attracts today people in our countries, it's, in my eyes, another punishment of heaven. Because there was a time when Our Lady was expressed, the moon under their feet, it was the half moon. It was the spirit really of the 16th century and 17th century when Our Lady, nobody then, Our Lady with the help of the Christian armies won over all these Islamic Turks. And in this moment we see, in these events we see that the Islam, not in as some people there who expect, but the Islam as an ideology can only be again overcome by the special intervention of Our Lady. And here again, Father Gruner says, it is really the importance that Our Lady as herself must be known. I was in Africa, in Gabon, and once we had Islamic workers. And I was amazed. They worked in the church, and they came and they say, who is this? And I explained them the miracle of Our Lady. It was Our Lady, the Sacred Immaculate Heart of the Mary of Fatima. I explained them that, Fatima. And he was like, this is the mother of Jesus. And they explained all these things. You can imagine, this man looked around. His name was Musa. Never forget this thing. And he looked, nobody was there. And he knelt down, he started to weep. I said, what has happened to you? I would like so much to belong to her. But I can't. If not, they kill me and my family. See? So I think, again, Our Lady has absolutely the main word to say, not only in a conversion of anybody, but also especially of Islam. If the Christian countries would come back to Our Lady, Islam would itself diminish.
We have time for one final question. Father Gruner, one priest in attendance at the conference has a strategy question for you. Given that the cooperation of church authorities will be necessary to have the consecration of Russia done, doesn't the criticism of church authorities voiced by several speakers at the conference make such cooperation unlikely?
Well, that's I guess the perennial question that if you don't tell them what is necessary and what is the obstacle, then they will never come to understand what they must do. If, on the other hand, you tell them that they are part of the problem, they could take it personally, and possibly how it's expressed, either by myself or someone else, might be taken either because we are not as virtuous as we should be, or because our words are misunderstood, or our tone. Whatever it is, I wish I knew the answer to that. I'd rather not be in this position in the first place. Myself, I've asked the Blessed Virgin more than once that she should find somebody more capable, more virtuous, in order to be able to pass this message on. To me, it's a dilemma how to do it. If there are those who have the powers and the capacity for diplomacy, and they can explain this matter to Cardinal Bertone and others like him, that really it's in their own best interests to get out of the way of opposing Our Lady, and that they themselves will be benefited, they themselves will be blessed, even if they've been her opponents up to now. How to be able to, I don't have access. As you know, last year when I went to the Vatican for the visit with the Pope, apparently they know me well enough to recognize that when I'm a picture in the same picture with the Pope, I'm erased out by the airbrush. So it's obvious to anyone that they don't want to hear from me. I'm told, Cardinal Lodi told me back in 1994 or thereabouts, I used to visit him. He's a very nice gentleman, very nice cardinal. And one day he said to me, somewhat in surprise, he said, "You know, you're less aggressive than I am." Well, I agreed with him. We both laughed, of course, but he was a bit more aggressive than I was. And as a priest in Canada has told me, if the bishops only knew you, they would have a very different attitude towards you. I am not what my persona has been portrayed, but no doubt, sometime when I say something, it can be taken out of context. Maybe I'm too tired, and the impression is created is quite something different. So Our Lady's got to find someone else to pass this message on, since obviously so far I've not been able to do it. But the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem told me, continue your work, speak out in public, talk about the consecration. This Latin Patriarch in the Synod of 1983 made an intervention calling for the consecration of Russia. He said, I will continue through the diplomatic channels. So no doubt the diplomatic channels might get there before the open approach, whatever it takes. The main thing is Our Lady be obeyed. And my apologies if I've overstepped any lines. I don't know what else to say.
Pray a great deal and make sacrifices for sinners, for many souls go to hell because they have no one to make sacrifices and pray for them.
Our Lord said to Sister Lucia of Fatima, "The sacrifice that each one can make is to do his duty and obey my law. That is the form of penance I now demand."
The Blessed Virgin gave us a message how to have world peace, that only she can help us. But perhaps we don't get enough perspective. We say, well, nothing dramatic has happened. And it's because our commentators, our newspapers, our editor writers, the people that we really pay attention to, the people that speak on television, in the mainstream press and so forth, people who are under the pay of the enemy often, have yet to point out to us that since we have despised Our Lady's message as the human family, we've despised it, there have been 1,686,570,000 violent deaths as a direct result of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima. That is, again, 1 billion. That is 1 with 9 zeros after it, plus another 686 million people who have died violently for the one simple reason that we've ignored Our Lady of Fatima. We could point out, perhaps another time, that if this is not enough perspective to give us that in these 95 years of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima, we have paid a tremendous price. But as bad as that is, that price will be doubled or tripled in the next couple of years if we ignore her much longer. Just a few months ago, the world's population passed 7 billion people. 7 billion people. Scripture tells us, and other prophecies tell us, that 1/3 to 2/3 of the entire population of mankind will be wiped out in this war to come. I don't know what it takes to wake us up. Maybe we have to find it on NBC or CBS or some commentator in the New York Times before we finally take this seriously. And maybe we say to ourselves, we take it seriously, but I think we don't take it seriously enough.